I'm Mark Seifter.
And I'm Linda Zayas Palmer.
And this is Arcane Mark. Welcome everyone to Linda's Adventures Skull and Shackles Part 1.
Yes.
Part 1.
In which we take to the high seas. So, this adventure is a campaign that I ran. I guess I'm technically still in part 6 of it, and I'd like to finish that up with you sometime soon. But, that I've been running for Mark for a while. Mark is the only player. I am the GM. And the impetus of this campaign...
It's been since the Occult Adventures playtest.
Since the Occult Adventures playtest. Because the reason that we got started with this game in the first place is that is to get some playtest information for Occult Adventures. So in this game, Mark has 3 PCs and I have 2 GM PCs, and each of my GM PCs is an Occult Adventures playtest character. So I have the hydrokineticist Aram Wetfoot, a halfling with a halfling who has a strong connection to the Kaniano, who are a bunch of Adaro's shark people and can speak to sharks. And
wasn't Aram from like Medio Galti?
He was from Medio Galti originally, and he had like this really topsy-turvy way of getting out there.
The Red Mantis
were after him at some point, but like he wasn't.
But
really,
not like as a murder target, just they didn't like him.
Yeah, well, he wasn't like important enough for them to actually want to kill. He had messed around with some things, and so he fled to Port Peril, and the Kaniano were part of his survival in that case, of helping him lay low and escape until they decided he wasn't worth the effort and whatever. So that was sort of his deal. He's kind of a tries to keep a low profile, which
He's
is
a halfling who can talk to sharks.
Yes, trying to keep a low profile, which is a useful trait to have for one of the 2 GM PCs, in terms of social things. And the other one of the GM PCs is Tethys Kaibali, a false medium, who...
Which is not to say she had the false medium rogue archetype,
no,
but...
her actual class is Herod Medium, which is the playtest version of the medium class, and which has the
completed playtest version.
The completed playtest, yeah. Medium. Well, technically, like there's still some spirits that aren't fully written out, but you wrote out all the spirits as I decided to.
No, all the spirits are written. They just don't have their spirit spells chosen.
Oh, that's right.
And we had to choose the spells for them when you took them because the spells were waiting for the final book.
Oh, that's right. That's what it was. Thank you for the sub, Healer Zero. So she is a Herald Medium, and by false medium, I mean that her profession is medium, but she does like a bunch of fake medium stuff with like crystals and orbs and candles and things like that, and that to make money without expending her own resources, and then she occasionally uses her spells and things like that, and her abilities to actually do things so that they're provable. Not provable, but there's reason for people to believe that she can do all sorts of cool things, but then most of the time it's just
she's a medium who disguises the fact that she's actually skilled under all the trappings of just a false medium who plays up all these stories that are completely not true. And she took the campaign background trait about like being the tall tale storyteller, which is an important subsystem in Skull and Shackles to build up your infamy, is to have someone who tells tall tales of what you did. Although, if I remember correctly, eventually Tethys was a little bit annoyed, but because our stories were so unbelievable that it was hard to actually embellish on them.
Yes, she was at one point. The stories were so ridiculous. It's like, come on, the truth is so ridiculous that if I embellish that that's already stretching credibility to get people to believe what actually happened. If I embellish it even farther, then it's just going to be too much. So she eventually learned that she had to actually tone down some of the things that you did so that she could embellish some of the other things, because otherwise it was not going to be believable.
Yep. She's a little bit of what do you call it? She was not quite a compulsional liar because when it came to like talking to people and giving her word and telling people about things, like she generally told the truth on that. But
when it came to reporting the events as they had happened, she like basically could not tell the truth. That was just a thing in her personality. You can't tell the truth about what actually happened in our grand exploits. And
she always had to make it like even more cinematic and more of a tall tale.
Mm-hmm. And she is a tiefling.
Yep.
With sort of the heritage that's tied to like aquatic creatures.
So she had like a swim speed and things
she
like
has
that.
She has like a tail that she hides underneath her skirts and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the two GM PCs. As for the three regular PCs, we have we should start with the captain now, shouldn't we?
Well, she's not the captain at the time. She's just some random person who was just press ganged, but was chosen by Besmara.
Yes.
So I had 3 characters. 2 of them are an example of relationships between PCs, one of the possible topics on the poll, because they were brother and sister. They were Hector and Rin Ilium, who are just like Pirate Lord Endymion, who's one of the Pirate Lords in the Shackles. They were formerly from Cheliax. In their case, their mother was an admiral from Cheliax, and their ship got shipwrecked on a really horrible island on the Shackles called Hesmani's Grotto, where a very powerful Rusalka lives. And they managed to escape with the help, but not really help, of a baby Typhoon dragon named Pontus, who's now a young Typhoon dragon, and Hector's spirit animal, using like a much depowered Typhoon dragon to be like a starting familiar. And they escaped and made it to the island of Besmara's throne, I think it's called. It's called something either really, very similar to that or exactly called that.
I'm pretty sure it's actually called Besmara's throne.
And it's a very sort of religious to Besmara area where it was determined by the high priestess there that the younger sister, Rin, or Mirani, Ilium, but Rin for short, was chosen by Besmara for something great and a great destiny, and it's also one of the campaign traits. Meanwhile, Hector is not as like gung-ho about piracy as his sister. Because Rin is like so religiously zealous to Besmara that she could have had like a religious class about Besmara. She did not. But in some ways she seemed to be more like actually like zealous and like devoted to Besmara than the cleric of Besmara NPC.
Yeah, no, she definitely if you can out-zealot the cleric, you're pretty zealous.
Well, to be fair, Besmara's clerics do have a statement in them that they are somewhat more transactional about, like, you know, don't sink us here, great lady, and they like, we give you praise and you give us stuff. But, like, Rin is more of, like, her worldview is that Besmara smiles upon those who do daring and brave and outlandish things, and it amuses Besmara, and she rewards them with treasure, but when she loses interest as part of her deity article, then she's just as fickle and will just turn aside and can just cause you to meet a horrible fate. So Rin feels like anytime there's a challenge that is outlandish, it's like, if we just don't do it, then Besmara is going to frown and just lose interest, and then we'll meet a horrible fate anyway. So we might as well do it and keep Besmara happy and entertained.
And now Hector, who does not even remotely believe that you have to do all this stuff to keep Hector entertained.
Hector is a true neutral shaman of waves. With his spirit animal is Pontus, the Typhoon dragon, and he is the level-headed, like, I don't know if this is a good idea, Rin, older brother, and each of them were sort of, like, are dealing with, sort of post-traumatic stress from being on the island of, Tasmania in different ways, and Hector has sort of some issues connecting with other people, to the fullest extent, whereas Rin just goes overboard, and, her Besmaran faith, and connecting with everybody, it makes them an interesting duo. They're definitely foils for each other, and, Hector is somewhat also of a foil with his chaotic familiar, who is a voice of the Spirit of Waves. So, specifically, though, Hector's Spirit of Waves, which he does not know, is former actual, just legit spirit, now deity, Besmara, who is trolling Hector by being the Spirit of Waves that grants him his shaman abilities, because she was originally a water wave spirit and not a deity, and she stole her deific powers from some of the other deities.
Pontus also doesn't know that...
Pontus doesn't know that the Spirit of Waves, he just considers himself an emissary of the sea, and he definitely acts on behalf of Besmara, but mostly in, like, his own self-interest or opinions, but he doesn't know that the Spirit of Waves he's working for is Besmara, so he's like, he makes, like, signs of Besmara's displeasure himself, because one of the signs of her displeasure is a sea creature creating mischief, and he is a sea creature creating mischief, so if he makes other signs of her displeasure, like seagulls dropping dead, that he engineers, those may be false, but he is creating mischief, which is true, so she is therefore displeased. But the funny thing is, she actually is displeased when he's doing that, because he's actually a spirit animal of Besmara.
Yes. So Hector, of course, is worried when he's mocking all these things, when he's mocking up all these things. It's like, you're making fun of Besmara. Like, Besmara might eventually get upset that you're doing all these things.
Pontus just is this extremely arrogant tide-pull dragon, but still, like, really wants to be an emissary to the sea and steps up to try to do things, and we're going to see it pretty much right away. The fact that Pontus is essentially up to his own shenanigans. So we've got Hector sort of in the middle.
Along for the ride because he's constantly getting pushed about on the dragged along by Rin and pushed about on the tides of just everything that's going on. But ultimately, above all else, he cares for his sister, and he wants to, and his sister is like the one person that he trusts and loves in this world, and he wants to make sure that she's safe. A task not made easy at all by her worldview or decision-making processes.
That's correct.
Yes.
So he's the voice of reason, somewhat, of the group, and basically the only, like, full-on spellcaster in the entire party. So it's a good thing that he secondaries with lore many spirit much of the time, so he can grab some spells that are not on the shaman list. He is definitely very mental ability score heavy character who, because if you know about Arcane Enlightenment, the shaman ability, it requires very high amounts of intelligence and charisma in addition to wisdom.
And fun fact, the experience of playing Hector here was what helped inspire one of the wave shaman archetypes that eventually came out.
That's true. What was the name of the wave shaman archetype that was in Aquatic Adventures? Because I wrote all the rules for Aquatic Adventures.
What was it called? Did I write it in his...
Wave shaman archetype. It was like... Oh, I think the Deep Shaman.
Oh, yeah, that sounds
So, Wave Shaman is actually legitimately so bad at being around water, where it should be good, that by playing that, I realized it just didn't really work. So, I created one of the only things I've created at Paizo that is legitimately just a power-up archetype in some ways, because normally, you know, archetypes are supposed to trade off equally. But Wave Shaman is actually just not up to snuff. And so the Deep Shaman archetype is pretty much an advantage in a lot of ways. So for, like, example, but not like in ways that make it super powerful. Like for example, the deep shaman's the regular wave shaman's spirit animal gains the ability to breathe underwater, right? But that means that you should pick like a monkey or a parakeet, because if you pick an animal that already lives in the water, you gain no assistance from that. So the deep shaman's deep spirit must be aquatic. It gains amphibious instead of gaining the ability to breathe in the water, and you get swim as a class skill additionally to that, because also you might have chosen one that was already amphibious. So the idea is, no, you can pick an actual aquatic animal for your spirit animal and get something for it. And then, like, generally a lot of the other differences that are in there are sort of based on that idea that, oh, they should probably be useful when you're actually in the water. Instead of being abilities that don't really work in the water. So
we had made some modifications along the way to it when we realized that it wasn't like necessarily powerful enough. And of course, when Mark put this archetype out, I read through.
Yeah, you would change like one of the blast abilities so it actually worked underwater, and I used that as sort of a basis for one thing in the archetype. But anyway, the point is that Hector was very much like he's the most cerebral character in the group. Obviously, Tethys still has the most charisma. Tethys and Rin as the swashbuckler and medium. Hector's isn't that bad, but he is very like reticent to trust people at the same time. But when it comes to intelligence or wisdom, like Hector's got most of both for the group, and that
Hector still never picked a first level feat.
Yeah, I know, but you can't take extra hex, and I don't know what it should be.
Just take improved initiative.
Yeah, but I don't know. I don't really need him to go first in battle that much. So, our last character is Antiope, or Tai, who is she is a brawler from Port Peril. The others, two, as I said, were initially from Cheliax and Shipwrecked, and then from Besmara's Throne. But Tai just lived in Port Peril. She's like extremely multicultural with like parents. But her grandparents included a Mwangi, a Garundi, and an Avistani. Like Taldan ethnicity grandparent, and she basically has had to fend for herself on the streets of Port Peril due to the fact that her mother kind of was just like, this is a financial burden, so you do you. And she's extremely tough and skilled in every possible combat technique as a brawler. She projects a persona that's also extremely tough and uncrackable, but she has hidden layers of depths underneath. We had a lot of trouble determining what her alignment was. Throughout the campaign, we knew that she was not lawful and she was not good.
Yes.
But we weren't sure about any of the
We had a conversation in which we made it
clear why
her alignment was everything.
She wasn't chaotic evil.
Yes.
Also, but she might have been neutral evil.
Yes.
Or chaotic neutral.
Yes.
Or true neutral.
We made like a compelling argument why her alignment was each of those based on how you interpret her actions, because she doesn't necessarily say why she's doing things in the way she is.
Right. Also, she has a thing that I guess comes up because of some of the characters that are in the NPCs, but she really, really doesn't like prostitutes and other people engaged with that profession, partially because her mother was one, but also just she thinks it's a terrible profession. That's just a major...
That's an opinion that she has.
That's a major thing that she has, that for whatever reason there are NPCs who are like that, and they cause her to bristle. But she's just kind of this badass, rough and tumble fighter who really wanted to be specialized in unarmed attacks and still is. But as you will soon find out, there is there is a reach weapon that is so overpowered that even though it was a specific weapon and can't be increased from a +1 weapon ever, that in part 6 she still has and uses it, even though she really would rather like do unarmed attacks, and like she could have had a shield and got more AC, but it's just so good. So she then mixes up extreme amounts of reach with this reach weapon with kicking and shoving and elbowing people, getting close, for a completely different interpretation of combat style than I had expected going in. But hey, brawlers are nothing if not flexible.
And it goes to show how items can really shape things up. Also, our home group, and so by extension us when we're playing alone, has the habit of calling something blank of OP when it's something that we've determined it's OP. So staves of OP were pre-errata stabs of the master.
That's true.
Gloves of OP
were either gloves of reconnaissance or gloves of
dueling. So it's either the fighter version or the other version of gloves of OP.
You have to specify which gloves of OP.
Yes.
Yeah, and then there was the boarding pike of OP.
Yes.
Which we'll get to when we get to that in the story, but it's just becomes such a big part of her character. So we have these 5 characters. Only Hector and Rin really knew each other before the campaign started because they were brother and sister. Obviously, I mean, if you count Pontus as a character,
Pontus is totally a character.
Yee.
Pontus is the verbal tick of speaking in
he speaks in like weird pirate as performed in Treasure Island by that one actor.
But like only sometimes and not consistent. Well, all the time, but not consistently in the way he.
And he doesn't have that accent necessarily, but he does say things like "ye."
And it like,
Avast ye.
Yeah, but he'll also be like, So like if he wanted to be like, hold on to your boots, he'd be like, hold on to your boots.
Yes. Also, he pronounces dragon as dragon because he thinks that it is more like cultured and intellectual.
So he is the mightiest dragon.
Yes, he is the mightiest dragon. Yee.
Yes. And if you ask him to explain why he's the mightiest dragon, then he will explain to ye that when it comes to dragons, you always have to consider their power compared to their size.
Yes, he is the mightiest dragon because it is a ratio of power divided by volume.
Yes.
And when you consider that he is so small and that most of the powerful dragons are so large, you can realize that Pontus, who, like, as a spirit animal, has, you know, like, the base attack bonus and saves and skills of the shaman. Right? Which is pretty good for a tiny creature. So, therefore, his overall power makes him the mightiest dragon.
Yes.
Just like, and then, like, people were like, are you sure? Like, I think Ty asked him at one point, and he's like, when you're doing wrestling, don't you have weight classes?
Yeah.
Right? This is a reasonable way to determine who is the mightiest dragon. For size tiny.
Pontus won that argument.
Yep. She thought that was true, that you do have weight classes when you're wrestling.
So at any rate, the AP begins with the PCs being press ganged.
I think that we were drugged when we went to, like, the Formidably Made is the name of the tavern where we were drugged.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, they put oil of Taggart into your drinks in a way that, like, you wind up drinking huge amounts of poison, and
hooray!
In first edition, when you drink huge amounts of poison, eventually the DC just gets prohibitively
high. The DC goes up by 2 for every additional dose, and the duration extends by 50%.
Yes.
Oh no!
So they put it into, like, spicy food and alcohol that you guys were having, and you guys. And
it has a pretty long, like, onset. So if you don't taste it, you could easily consume many doses of oil of Taggart. Yes.
So you guys were just all happened to be in that tavern at the same time. The PCs kind of saw each other. Like, Tethys was telling stories, and then it was like, oh yeah, you know, this is storyteller. Aram is sitting in a corner. Ty is, like, arm wrestling people for money. And Aram and Hector.
Rin
and Hector are.
We're the new arrivals. We had come from Besmar's throne, and then Rin was like, we have to go to a pirate tavern now that we made it to Port Peril. And Hector's like, I don't know, those places can be pretty rough. They could be dangerous if we go there. And Rin says no. Besmara says that we have to go there. We'll find adventure and piracy. I'm sure there'll be people looking for shipmates. that will be recruiting from these pirate taverns. And so
Hector definitely had something to say. Definitely had something to say when they woke up. When they woke up that next morning in the hold of a ship, having been drugged the previous night.
Hector's like, I told you, and Ren's like, no, I told you they would be looking for pirate shipmates.
Look, we're on a pirate ship.
We made it.
Succeeded. And
we did it. We're on a pirate ship. This is awesome.
Yep. And Hector's like, all of our stuff has been taken. We're locked in the hold of a ship. How is this a good thing?
We're one step closer to becoming the new... I'm one step closer to becoming the new Hurricane Queen. Mm-hmm.
So, after this, it's of course, like, the other
Looking back on it, now that I'm thinking about it, she's not really that similar to the character Luffy from One Piece in that, like, he's much goofier than Rin. But, like, from the over-enthusiastic self-opinion of being king of the pirates from, like, the very beginning of the story, there's at least some similarity there.
So, like, Aram is just like, oh gosh, we're all gonna die, like, in a corner. Tethys is, like, Tethys is kind of agreeing with Rin that this is part of a grand adventure that they're on.
But who knows if she's just lying.
Because that's what she does.
I mean, we didn't know at the time, other than Tethys herself, about that. Mm-hmm. Tai is kind of looking for what's going on, looking for a way out, looking for someone that she could potentially fight if necessary. Mm-hmm. And we're in, like, this dark hold of the ship.
Yeah, you're in that
dark hold. Did they, like, open up the hatch?
Yeah, and then Master Scourge opened up the hatch. A guy who didn't want to tell you his name and just wanted you to know that he carries a whip.
Master Scourge. Wasn't that actually his name, or did he have a separate name that we never learned?
The AP never gave him another name, but I just assumed
that
I just assumed that was a title that he took for himself, because, like, what are the chances that the guy who carries a whip's actual name is?
I mean, it could be.
Maybe it is.
Right? I think your name could be Scourge.
It could be.
Like, if your parents named you Scourge, wouldn't you carry around a whip and go by Master Scourge?
I mean, I guess there does seem to be, like, an unusually high number of dentists who are, like, who have names that are, like, Dr. Payne or, like, Dr.
My orthodontist's last name was Bonebreak.
Yeah, see? It happens. So...
See?
Yeah.
So, but also, he could have had his name legally changed to Scourge.
He could have... I mean, getting your name legally changed in Port Peril is probably not that hard. Like, can't you just be like, that's my name, and then everyone will accept that?
And then he can change it again and be the artist formerly known as Scourge.
I don't think that pirates are, like, too picky on people's right to determine their own names.
That's true. I mean, many of the characters just went by a nickname that was part of their name anyway, like Mirani, Rin, and Antiope Tai.
Yep.
Aram was sometimes known as Arampa.
Just because
of Yoshi-san. Arampa.
That's not... He wasn't called that in character because that would make no sense, but we named him after the... we sometimes called him that just out of character, because why not give things a ridiculous nickname out of character?
Of course.
Like Etch-a-Sketch.
Yes, well, Etch-a-Sketch didn't like Arampa.
No, Etch-a-Sketch did not like Arampa.
Alright, so...
Etch-a-Sketch,
So, Master Scourge is this guy with a whip who just opens up the hatch.
And he's just like, on your feet, you filthy swabs. Get on the deck and report for duty before Captain Harrigan flays your flesh into sausage skins and has fish gets fired up for breakfast.
So, they each with varying levels of enthusiasm, which you can imagine that Rin was at the top of those varying levels.
Like, yay, we're on a ship! And he's just like...
Went to report for duty.
What's wrong with you?
And so... It's a very important note that Rin absolutely knew from the High Priestess of Besmara that she had been chosen for great things by Besmara. So, I don't remember when the first time is that they decided to discipline her, but she basically, when they got to that point, she warned them as like, It's like, I will accept this discipline, whatever you feel is necessary, but I want to warn you first that the High Priestess of Besmara's throne has prophesied that I'm chosen by Besmara, so she may be displeased.
And it's just like, and the pirates, of course, just think she's full of crap and trying like this completely unbelievable scheme to get out of being disciplined, and they're just like, whatever. And they're like, you see, if you keep up with those tall tales, and they discipline her.
This quickly got her on the crap list of Master Scourge's boss, who was, I think, the what was his official title?
What was Mr. Plug's official title?
Was he first mate?
Yeah, I think he was. He was at least a very high position.
Was he first mate and is Scourge the bosun? Or
yeah,
something
I think that's what it was. Yeah.
So Mr. Plug.
Yep. Also, you guys, and that when you woke up, Hector did notice that you had been poisoned by Olive Taggett from the nutmeggy aftertaste.
Yep.
So you did know kind of what had happened that night. So you guys did not decide to attack Master Scourge and his pirates here, which you totally could have, and it wouldn't have gone well for you. But yeah, all of your gear had been.
Master Scourge is a pretty high level character.
Yeah, he's a CR3 character.
He was definitely higher level when in your version.
Yes, he was.
That.
But I assumed that he leveled up through the course of stuff that was going on as well, and that he was higher level to start with. So,
yeah, I'm pretty sure that he was level 5 or 6.
Well, the thing is that you guys
was even higher level.
You guys were really, really powerful. So
that's true.
Particularly the swashbuckler with her inability to get hit by anything, or her ability to avoid getting hit.
Hey, she's only really powerful against anything that uses melee attacks.
Yeah.
Some things don't use melee attacks.
Some things use will saves.
Some things use will saves or fortitude saves. She was not powerful against that. Mm-hmm. She needed Tethys' help when we went to the Tower of Everything is a will save and a fortitude save.
Yes. But that's not for a while yet.
Yep.
And there's even a section here about, like, what happens with animal companions and familiars. You can decide, like, if they stow away or whatever. But
yep. Pontus stowed away.
Get captured, but Pontus definitely would stow away. So Pontus stowed away.
Pontus was free and about on the ship with his tiny size, skulking about and creating his own, not random, very, very intentional mischief. Which was every time that Ren got disciplined for something, he created one of the from the book, the known religious signs of displeasure of Besmara, and caused it to happen. So, for instance, I mentioned before, seagulls dying, like dead seagulls, is one of Besmara's signs of displeasure. So Pontus started, like, capturing and killing seagulls and storing them away in this area below decks where people weren't paying attention until he had a bunch of them. And then he sort of gathered them together in a net with his little claw.
Yeah.
Flew around away from the ship, up above cloud level. Went down until he could barely see that he was above the ship, and then just sort of opened up the net and started tossing down dead seagulls from high above so they would land on various parts of the ship. He
also did some shenanigans with torches where he, like, created shadows of, like, this great giant dragon that was, like, stalking and things like that because he didn't want to be seen or affiliated with the PCs. He just wanted to create a sense that you don't want to mess with the PCs, or Rin specifically.
Yes, he did not do anything when they disciplined Hector, his actual shaman.
That's true.
Not at all.
No.
But if they disciplined Rin, who was chosen by the sea, then they got all sorts of signs of displeasure of Besmara.
But sort of back with NPCs, like, after they were taken up to the top of the ship, they met with the captain, who's all like, don't kill anybody or I'll keel haul you. Thank you for volunteering for my ship, ha 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 ha.
Keel hauling is a famous pirate term that I wasn't exactly sure what it was, although I knew it was bad, but I learned in Skull and Shackles that is where they put you along the side of the ship until the barnacles scrape off your skin.
Yep.
That's what it is. Now you know it too, or maybe you already knew.
Yeah, there aren't always barnacles on the ships, but there were definitely barnacles on this one. Yes, Mr. Plug was indeed the first mate here, and Mr. Plug has a variety of positions to fill on the ship. So he decided to he decided to test the PCs to see what they were what they were very skilled at. So testing them in climbing and testing them in cooking to see who would become like the rigger and the cook's mate. And then after that, just being like, oh yeah, the rest of you are swabs, and if I get upset with you, then you... And then, like, the rest of you were swabs, and then sort of where everyone else wound up in terms of their duties, depended upon how upset he was with them. Aram managed to manipulate the situation to be on bilge duty, which Aram wanted bilge duty because
it's considered the worst.
It's considered the worst.
Where all of the the waste from the ship is, and it gets cluttered up in there.
But what Aram did was he would like sneak around and just kind of do what he felt like on the ship for a bit, and then he'd like go and occasionally make the appearance of working down there, but then he'd just like go in and quickly use his hydrokinesis.
He has basic hydrokinesis, which is essentially a water bell, so he can just move and clean the bilges.
So he just like pull water in
very easily.
Pull water in, swipe it all through, clean the bilges, and then like be done.
Yep.
And then they were like,
don't make me do the bilges.
Don't make me do the bilges. It's like, but he kept being good at the bilges, so it's like he was stuck on bilge duty. It's like, oh no, I'm stuck on bilge duty.
If I recall correctly, didn't like Tethys make the rigger, even though she was not actually the best at rigging, because she just did better at those skill checks?
Yes.
And Hector failed miserably at rigging, but he did the best at cooking and wound up being the cook's Ambrose Croup or something like that.
Yeah, Fish Guts.
Ambrose Fish Guts Croup.
That's right.
Apprentice on the ship. And then the rest of everybody else were swabs.
Mm-hmm.
So that is how our roles got assigned. But Linda also, for like emergency situations like storms, Linda created like a subsystem where certain roles within the ship had to be performed successfully to survive the storm.
Yeah. So then there was a little storm subsystem that we had, and we put in every time there was a storm. It may have been based on something that was in the AP, but I know that I worked on the rules for sure to be like, okay, yeah, you have these certain roles, and these roles make certain checks.
Yours were more complicated.
Yeah.
Also.
Well, the thing is, you didn't actually have to do with it that much because the captain can make an outsized influence on how well things happen, and in that ship you were fine. Really, it was once you later were in a situation where you weren't on this ship, and then your PCs and the people they had on the crew had to fill all of these. It was like, oh yeah.
That was an interesting, different situation that we'll get to later, where that was something that finally made Rin, who was just like the most, pirates, no worries, character, be like, this is a problem, when we were on the second ship. But, I remember that you used that subsystem both times. It was more complicated than what was in the AP. The captain could have a role, but you assign people to different tasks, and
because you had to have people who were on the sails, and you had to make sure that they didn't fall off the sails while they were adjusting the sails. You had to have people who were. The storms would generally cause like certain events, like water spilling over the sides that had to be pulled off, which was very easy, and you kept like putting Aram on all the tasks as well.
Oh boy! Water not it looks like the hydrokineticist can move water.
This was very relevant at a lot of points in this AP. Or like there would be like damage to the hull that you had to repair during the storm, or like making sure that things were secured down so that cargo didn't fall off. There were a variety of challenges that would come up, and then checks that you had to roll. Like the navigator had to make sure that you didn't get terribly blown off course or lost while storms were going on, etc., etc.
Yep. And we started on the ship the Wormwood, which had just a very high-level crew overall, with like a very effective navigator and a sorcerer who was the ship's mage, named Peppery, and a ship surgeon, which is someone who's not only a surgeon for you, but also a surgeon for the ship, because they know how to craft wood working. And fix the ship, who was called, like, what was his name? He was like the...
what was the surgeon's name?
It's like... It wasn't like Mr. Stitches, but it was like... Or the was it the Stitch Man?
Oh, yeah, I think it was. Something like that.
Yeah.
Because there was... Yeah, well...
And a bunch of other characters.
Yeah, because there was Sandara,
Sandara was the cleric of Besmara.
Rosie Cuswell.
She's a halfling.
A halfling swab. Crimson Cogward, who is also a swab.
Also known as Cog.
Same time as you guys. Conchabar, who is a rigger on the ship.
Yep, a gnomish rigger with a reputation for foppery.
Yes. And then a variety of other people on the ship. So we had, let's see, there's Barefoot Sam's, the Toppin, the rigger, Giffer Tibbs, swab, Jack Scrimshaw.
Yep.
Yes.
Was Gifford Tibbs was a gnome swab, if I recall correctly.
Yes, yeah, Gifford Tibbs a gnome swab. Ratline Ratsburger, the rat-faced halfling, who people kept joking, like, you have to... there's no way that you're not actually a were-rat.
Mm-hmm.
Rosie is amazing, I agree. Tilly Brackett.
Mm-hmm.
Badger Medlar. Shivika, Areta Bastion. There are a lot of people on this ship. Some of them... But I think what's important...
Oh, yeah, there's Areta...
Yeah.
Areta and Phipps and Jape.
Yeah, Fitch, Jape, and Slippery Sill were all...
And Mahim.
And Mahim were all sort of hostile, and Narwhal Tate.
Oh, yeah.
We're all hostile to the PCs to start with.
A lot of the people in that sort of section were extremely loyal to Plug, who just hated Rin, like, almost immediately, and especially after the whole Chosen of Besmara thing.
Yeah. He really didn't like that, because it made people question his authority. So you sort of had the NPCs at this point were either, there were some that were solidly against the PCs because Plug was against the PCs and they were going to kiss up to the authority, or for whatever other reasons they had. Areta,
or because they were in a relationship with Plug.
Or because they were in a relationship with Plug, or a variety of other things. And Areta being a former prostitute was especially someone who Ty did not get along well with.
Because I believe she was in a relationship with Plug.
She was in a relationship with Plug,
abusive to everyone, and she was someone Ty did not like.
Yes. So you sort of had these groups of NPCs. There were the ones that were kind of just trying to go about their own business and not get involved, and the ones who were actively against the PCs. Although the PCs throughout this time on the ship, they had opportunities to converse with people.
We used a long-term influence subsystem based on Linda's influence subsystem, but not exactly the same, to try to influence during different time ticks.
Yes.
When we spent time with people or had free time, to get them to like us more. Even some of the ones who were hostile eventually changed their mind about one of the PCs.
Yeah, so what they could do then is, like, everybody had a different DC sort of based on their charisma for, like, how difficult it was. There were certain skills that were good for different ones. And if the PCs were able to quickly complete their tasks by using, like, clever strategies or by doing well on skill checks, then they could earn extra phases. You could take phases at night to spend extra time to hang out with people, but the more you did that, the harder the DC got to avoid being fatigued, which could then cause some other issues later.
You could get discipline for being fatigued. And there were rum rations that were extremely deadly that you had to deal with. But, like, Aram, for example, he did not have social skills. He didn't even really have the secondary skills that were good for people to converse with people. He was a kineticist. Not really, but he kept getting bonus phases because he could clean the bilges in basically no time, and not like the expression no time. Like, it really didn't take almost any time.
Yeah.
So he had a lot of chances to try to influence people. Or like Crimson Cogward, if I remember correctly, was someone who really loves unarmed combat and things like that. So they had like a wrestling or fighting competition that he was sort of... He thought that Ty was really awesome for how well she did at that.
And to be fair, like, the AP already had some things about, the AP already had sort of the system about ship actions and improving attitudes and stuff like that. I didn't add that. I just modified it to be more similar to the influence system.
Also, wasn't Cutthroat Grok and Croup in there? They weren't listed because they weren't listed in that long list because we talked about Croup, the cook. Maybe they have a bigger thing for them.
Yeah, well, because they have then there are the officers.
Cutthroat Grok is the quartermaster.
Yeah, Cutthroat Grok, the quartermaster, and then the other officers as well. Harrigan, Peppery.
Captain Harrigan.
Harrigan, Peppery Longfarthing, the sailing master. Viaris Kryn, the gunner. Havely Quarn, the stitchman, the surgeon. Kipper, the gunner's mate. Patch Salt, the bosun mate. Cocky Taroon, the captain's cabin girl, and Owlbear. And Owlbear Harshorn.
The very strong, but not very bright.
A very strong but not very bright sailor who was generally horribly taken advantage of.
Yes, and mistreated.
And mistreated by others on the ship, yes.
It looks like Stunt Monkey's group had a habit of stealing things from officers and putting them in the lockers of people who disliked them.
That does seem like a useful habit.
Yes.
So there were a lot of NPCs.
They were, and they all have like a pretty deep personality, either because the AP gave them one, or because Linda just created longer personalities for these two-sentence characters.
I did create longer personalities for everyone on the ship, and this is one of those things where because it was a campaign with only one player, we could really take the time to, like, indulge in
one-on-one conversations.
Indulge in one-on-one conversations where each of the PCs had their chance to build their own unique relationship with all of these NPCs who were on the ship.
Yep, because there's a long list of ones you might interact with. Then there's super lengthy descriptions of, like, Master Scourge and Mr. Plug. Then there's just, other officers at the end. And even some of the other officers at the end were ones that some of the PCs wanted to hang out with.
Yeah, and then I added the other officers to people that the PCs could try to befriend. Although some of them, like, befriending Peppery was, like...
It was not easy because she had high charisma. And the DC to befriend someone is based on your charisma. But Rin actually managed to befriend Peppery the sorceress. Who was one of Captain Harrigan's, like, long-term adventure companions.
So that's not something that it assumes that you can possibly do at this stage. And if you're familiar with the AP, you might recognize that Rin having a friendship with Peppery could actually, like, influence things later on. And some of them also befriended Cocky Taroon, which also had an impact.
We didn't, like, quite befriend her that much.
You were at least part of the way there, which gave you some more ins to try to make a better relationship with her later on.
Yeah, we did try to do that. We did try to do that later on, but we had befriended Peppery so far that she was very much our friend when we parted ways. But with Cocky,
she was more neutral. She was
more neutral, but and we had to befriend her fully later on. We definitely befriended Owlbear though, and some of these other people. And
not Kipper and Patch though. Kipper and Patch were just completely bootlickers.
Riara's crime may have been an evil master gunner who was just constantly insulting people and trying to train us in different combat techniques and boarding. But she actually liked Ty.
Yes, Riara's liked Ty. Riara's didn't like anyone else, but Riara's liked Ty.
She liked only Ty.
Yes.
And she grudgingly respected some of Rin's skills, but thought they were too flashy. Thought
that Rin was too much like trying to avoid the work of things by putting out this whole like giant story about how awesome she was, and she should cut the crap and get down to business.
She liked Ty, and she liked Ty's style, which is that Ty would, when necessary, she would just she as a brawler, she could have some of those obscure weird feats that, like, nobody has. Like, Siege Engineer. We need to use a siege engine. Good thing that's a combat feat. I can do it. Or, if it's like, let's fight with bows. Because that's, is that your specialty? I can fight with bows, too, because I'm a brawler, so I can get all these feats in bows. So, it just made it so that Ty was very competent at whatever the heck we actually had to do.
Yes, and Crime definitely, like, made unfair challenges by being like, and today we're gonna do this thing.
And Rin could not, like, fight well with bows.
Yeah.
Or, like, a strength-based weapon.
Yeah. Kryn is in here as a fighter, but I changed her to a brawler because we had brawlers now, and that made a lot of sense.
So Linda has a giant spreadsheet
I have a giant spreadsheet
where we determined our friendship levels with every NPC.
And you got XP based on friendship levels with NPCs, and some of them were worth more than others because of how difficult they were.
Cough peppery,
yes. I also had the NPCs that actually adventured along with the PCs. I had them earning XP based on some of their exploits and leveling up throughout.
Which were some of these NPCs, plus also like some of the ships we captured. Just joined us instead of not joining us, and they friendship is XP. That's right. I think that may be the name of the spreadsheet or something like that.
Yeah,
but
friendship and XP. Yeah. And that because with that one I tracked. And this is one thing that I like that I did with this campaign. I feel that like I had like this one for the XP from friendship, and then. On the other XP tracker, it summed up how much XP they had, but it was across a bunch of columns, and each of the columns like sort of described how they earned that XP. So it might be like encounter with the crab swarms or something like that.
Just so like I did in Jade Region.
Yeah, so that there's like a chronicle of the various encounters that the PCs
absolutely.
Did there. Yeah.
So if you can imagine how this worked out. It's a little bit different than the initial IP, but is based on the thing. It really kind of felt almost like, like Persona Press Gang by the Pirates edition, because we were doing these different tasks, and then there were times that we could spend building up our social links with various different characters who were in the party, who were on the ship, and. Oh yeah, there we go. So we can see who is friends with who.
Yeah.
So wait, who is friends with who? Let's see who we can remember. Does bold mean that they're very big friends?
Bold means that you guys didn't fully max out everyone being friends with them.
Oh, okay. So the ones that weren't bold were very big friends.
Yes, exactly.
So like Cog is not friends with Aram.
Yeah, we have.
Potsubar is not friends with.
And then italicized people were people who are no longer on the ship, so you couldn't continue to befriend them. Eventually, we just stopped using this system because it was assumed that the PCs could try to befriend people over time while they were all on the same ship, but the XP that was worth at that point in time was not worth our our tracking.
And some of the italicized people came back.
Yeah. So so it was like, what did they get for each of these things? Freeing Magpie. The first day. Providing entertainment on the ship.
Because there's a guy named Magpie who was imprisoned.
Who was imprisoned and who they freed. Spiders in the bilges. Recovering your gear. Hazed. Rats in the bilges, etc. So, like, every single one of these things. And so some of them...
yeah. So, when it came to recovering our gear...
Yes.
What basically happened was that Pontus got our gear back. Because all of his weird Mesbara-related superstitious happenings also happened, like, around the gear of Rin from it being, like, taken away by the pirates. It turns out that Cutthroat Grok, the quartermaster, is also extremely superstitious. So between Pontus and Tethys, who was someone who had a good relationship with her, but also was constantly talking about the spirits and being a medium, they unknowingly tag teamed Cutthroat Grok into basically giving back all of the gear to stop these superstitious things from happening.
Because Grok is very superstitious.
This would not be the last time that Tethys and Pontus worked together, but it would be the first time and one of the only times they accidentally worked together.
It works very well when you have the tall person who's just like, yes, and then the curse of the sea might come, and
Cutthroat Grok is like, I've seen these things, and should I be worried about it? It's like, oh no, I mean, the worst it could do is that your arm will turn black and then fall off from the black spot that's the curse of the sea. And but that probably won't happen.
Yeah. And then, like, Pontus sneaks in while they're asleep and puts black dye on something, and then, that's the kind of thing that they would do.
Yep.
Like, oh my gosh, it's the black spot. What should we do? Oh, the black spot is vanishing now.
Oh yeah, what were the pirate entertainments?
The
I
Pirate
can't remember right now. I know that
was...
they made us like fight, and then they would do certain challenges.
And they made you like there was also some storytelling.
Storytelling was one of them,
which you guys were obviously good at because you had
rum rations.
Surviving the rum rations. The rum rations are so weird.
The weirdest thing about the drinking contest, okay, is that there's more than one of them, especially if you use Plunder and Peril, which we did, and we did slow XP and added in Plunder and Peril partway through this AP, just into the sandboxy part.
Yeah.
And the two drinking contests, one of them is a Constitution check, the other one is a Fortitude save. So the one that's a Fortitude save, some of my character, or like, Ty doesn't have great con. It's not bad, but it's not great. But she has high fort, so she'd be fine at that. The one that's con check only, Aram, as a kineticist, has way higher con than even much higher level characters than him. So he's just way better than everyone else at that one.
So there are certain alcohols that it's easier that are con based, and certain alcohols that are fortitude based. Apparently,
for drinking contests.
Uh-huh.
And I know they made us fight Owlbear.
They made you fight Owlbear, and you were sure to use non-lethal in that fight.
It was definitely not easy because I believe they made Rin fight Owlbear and not with her rapier.
And not with her rapier, yeah.
Which is an issue for her as a swashbuckler, but basically what wound up happening is that they gave Rin punishments because they thought she was uppity, even though she was just very enthusiastic, go-getter, like doing tasks, trying to help out. She other than warning them about the Besmara thing, like she took the punishments that they gave, even if they were unfair, and didn't complain about them. But since Pontus was creating these Besmaran signs, what eventually happened was that the captain, who just didn't really want to be bothered, he had his own things to do, he let his first mate do most of everything, he eventually was, like, very upset about these Besmaran signs and disciplined his first mate and was like, I have less confidence in you. I thought that you were, like, ready to be a captain of your own ship, but I don't know anymore, and you need to stop this and stop having Besmara be displeased with us. Which made Plug furious.
Yep.
With Rin, because of the fact, but he couldn't really do anything because the captain was watching him.
Yes.
And Rin was not acting up. She was just doing her part on the ship. And so he could, like, underhandedly try to screw her over, but he was actually banned from giving her arbitrary, capricious punishments.
Yes.
And,
Pontus and Rin were amused. Hector was afraid that this would lead to bigger consequences.
Rin didn't know Pontus was doing things, but...
No, but Rin didn't know it was Pontus.
Rin was vindicated.
Pontus was amused. Hector was terrified that this would lead to...
Like, being killed. Even though, yes, the captain said if someone killed someone else, they would be investigated, figured out, and then keel-hauled, but... Still, there's so many ways that Plug could have done that side-handedly. Fortunately, Plug was very afraid of Harrigan. Harrigan was very high level and probably would have been able to see through anything that Plug did.
Yes. So, and this is about when they did have that storm, and the storm, they had a storm here with, like, a storm system that was the basis of the more complex storm system that I made later on.
It was easy this time because, first of all, I think it was meant to be easy, but we had some bad rolls, so it got worse than Linda thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
And so eventually, like, Harrigan and some of the senior high-level people that Linda had just been, we're not going to do anything, just came out, and Harrigan was so high-level that he would just, like, critically succeed at every possible thing. And so we easily made it through what was supposed to not be that hard of a storm, but like a warning about that this subsystem might come in later when we didn't have these high-level people.
And by critically succeed, we did like to play around with critical success-like ideas before 2nd edition, where it's like,
I mean, Pathfinder 1st edition has those, though.
But, like, it has them in places, but, like, I really like those ideas anyway, so I brought them in, like, even when they weren't already
your influence system has it more codified than the original one that Thirsty wrote. and
but just in general,
climbing
like that
has it.
Yeah.
Normally, disabling devices has it. A lot of things in Pathfinder First Edition had it, especially for skills. It's just that it wasn't consistent. How much more you needed to roll to get the critical success? Was it 5?
Was it 10?
Was it 5? Was it 10? Is there a critical failure or not? Ivis says different rum has different saves.
And then you were attacked by reef claws on a reef.
Yep.
An adventure.
I feel like there were like spiders in the bilge.
There were spiders in the bilges. There were all sorts of things that were constantly attacking you guys. This one was noted on my XP tracking sheet as reef claws in a reef.
How shocking!
At what point did this was but Farusa wasn't on this.
No. Farusa was on the island.
On the island, that's right. Okay. So then you had sort of like you had a variety of other things like boarding school where you like practice boarding ships, and they were training people how to
those people and the other officers, were legitimate officers. Mm-hmm. They trained us. They knew what they were doing. If they weren't in the other officers because they were Plug or Scourge, they were not. Mm-hmm. And they were not really legitimate officers.
Yeah. I think it's very appropriate that Riaris' picture here is her yelling at you because that is basically what she did the entire time.
They were not necessarily nice officers. They were not good people, but they were legitimate officers for the ship. The description of Riaris'
thing is her language makes Rosie Cuswell sound like a nun. So
yep.
So there was a lot of language and yelling there going on.
Yep. Oh, because Rosie Cuswell's name, as mentioned before by Joe, is very appropriate name. She cusses well.
Mm-hmm. And and at this point, sort of after this is the sort of unpleasant duties event where this naturally happened.
Is that where Plug was mad, so he tried to put people in the worst test for them instead of the one that they actually were good at?
Yeah. That triggered sooner than it was supposed to here because of what you guys did.
Fortunately, also, the PCs befriended each other pretty early on. They were in the bilge. They were in the hold together, not the bilge. And so Aram actually chipped in when somebody else was on bilge because it was just so easy for him to do the bilge.
Aram went in and did bilge for other people.
Mm-hmm. And, but yes, he started capriciously changing it so that people had to do tasks that they were not good at. Mm-hmm. The only person who managed to avoid that was Hector.
Yes.
Because when you get assigned to be the cook's apprentice, that's like an actual thing that an actual other officer, the cook, is doing with you, and you don't get pulled off of that for anything, which is good because Hector could well have just died from trying to climb those ropes and then falling and dying.
And Fish Guts liked Hector. I mean, Hector was a better cook than Fish Guts, so people were generally happy with him being in that role too.
And Fish Guts was someone who had a big dream, but then had it crushed away, and he was very drunk.
Yes.
A lot of the time.
Mm-hmm. You guys felt really sorry for Fish Guts, as I recall.
And he also had if I remember correctly, he had feelings for Cutthroat Croc, the quartermaster, but that they had not actually talked about it.
Yeah. Well, because he was he was convinced that he wasn't worthy of her attention, so he shouldn't even try, and
Mm-hmm. There were a lot of different things that made the characters more complicated. Mm-hmm. I feel like the character Shivika is just she is in the book is she is a Beckyar.
Yes.
And that's it. But Linda had this whole thing where she's a Beckyar, but she actually despised the demon worship that is famous among Beckyar. And so that's why, even though Beckyar do their own trading, for the most part, she left to join a pirate crew.
Yeah. I have these long documents where I have personalities for all these different people.
So it's not only that long list of people, but as you might know from the AP, spoiler alert, eventually we in Mutiny on the Wormwood, the Wormwood Mutiny, you actually don't mutiny on the Wormwood, surprisingly. But you do mutiny, and during that mutiny, we decided that we were going to release all the captives who had been captured on the ship that we did mutiny on, and if they're willing to fight for us, they could also leave or join our pirate crew. And some of them joined our pirate crew. So Linda wrote down. Yes. They were Rahadumi. Wrote down like names and backstories of all these Rahadumi people and what was going on with them.
It was sort of like you can go, or you can work on our ship.
If you join us on the mutiny.
You join us on the mutiny.
Yep.
Yeah.
So she wrote all those names and names of other people who later joined us because we always offered people who surrendered the opportunity to join our crew or leave.
So there's this huge cast of like 50 or 60 NPCs that, and you really got into planning like who's on this ship, and as you guys got more and more ships as the campaign went on, it's like, okay, who's gonna be the captain on this one?
Yes,
who's gonna be the
we had this big fleet of ships.
Yeah.
Eventually, with all these NPCs, and Rin, Rin was basically a very good administrator in a sense, because she also had a sense for like who was loyal to us because we'd given them a ton of loot and they've been with us for a long time. So she didn't just balance the ships based on who was good at their jobs, but also based on making sure enough people who were loyal to us were on a certain ship, and that people who weren't loyal to us were also split among ships. So that was like, oh, so we got 8 people who were from this ship. And so those 8 people are on 8 different ships.
Yeah.
So even if they were on a ship with other people who weren't loyal to us, they weren't there with their shipmates from their former ship.
Yes. And when there were people who you guys thought could potentially be a strong asset, but could potentially be a problem, you put them on the flagship with you guys.
They were always on the flagship.
So you could keep a really good eye on them and deal with it if they tried any disloyalty.
I mean, I think that the siren that we recruited proved herself extremely valuable, but also possibly a loose cannon.
Yes, that's true. And so the siren stayed on your ship.
Yes.
But that's not for a while.
That's not for a while. Anyway,
First,
we got
real
distracted.
piracy.
We got distracted by that, but the point is, eventually, after we did all of these relationship building subsystem, and we got punished, and we built up, like, there was basically, if you think of the ship kind of like in the way Linda described, there are these other officers. They're the ones you're not supposed to deal with because they eventually stay on the Wormwood, and you encounter them later in the AP, including Captain Harrigan, who Rin actually like thought was cool because he was a good pirate captain at the beginning. That would change eventually later, but not for a little while. And those are the other officers.
Yeah.
Then you have the NPCs who have the long descriptions, who are officers in the Wormwood, but that are not sort of the ones that will stay on the Wormwood later, which include Plug and Scourge, who are adversarial, but it also includes Croup, Fishguts Croup, and Cutthroat Grok, who are sort of much more sympathetic characters.
Yeah.
Then there's this long list of other characters, but those long list of other characters are sort of like an onion, with the top level of here's pictures and art of all of them, and we definitely think you're going to recruit them. A middle level of, oh, there's not much information about them, but they seem friendly enough. And then, like, the inner layer is, like, the 2 inner layers are, these people are pretty much part of Plug's posse, and then the very inner layer is, these are Plug's inner circle, who are, like, actually really his friends, and not just, like, part of his the general hostile and don't like you posse. And so we managed to befriend the easy to befriend people and the moderate people and pretty much all the ones that were peripherally with Plug, but not his inner circle.
Core inner circle, yes.
Not any of them.
And importantly, the people who were then a reasonable contingent of people who Plug assumed would be on his side, but we're secretly more sympathetic toward the PCs.
Yep.
So as part 2 of this, as part 2 of part 1 begins, the PCs are afraid of their first taste of real piracy, an attack on the Rahadumi ship, the Man's Promise. So the PCs board the ship. There are sharks out in the water who are circling and ready. Sharks with whom Aram could naturally converse, so they weren't really a threat to you guys. there, and you guys.
I think that they weren't just there randomly, but that Harrigan had us chum the waters.
Harrigan had you chum the waters with with slaughtered pigs with pieces of slaughtered pigs to bring them in.
Stunt Monkey's group hated Plug so much that the GM made their lives miserable. So Harrigan, Rin respected. Mm-hmm. Other people didn't necessarily like him. Plug, nobody liked Plug. Mm-hmm. Rin at least didn't necessarily want to kill or replace him because she actually wanted to just be on a pirate ship and not get in trouble with the hierarchy of the pirate ship, but just prove herself and get her own ship. But that eventually changed too, because not only was Plug awful, which she could deal with, mm-hmm. but he was also incompetent.
Yes.
And the amount that he was incompetent became more and more obvious later on. But anyway, they chum the waters, mm-hmm. and then we attacked this ship called the Man's Promise because mm-hmm. of the named after the laws of mortality.
Yeah.
Which are the fundamental principles of Rahadu.
And generally, the super high level members of the ship's crew were content to stay back somewhat and allow some of their minions to deal with this and to come in if there was actually any problem. Like Harrigan could have obviously soloed everything.
Although I think at one point they were trying to assassinate Harrigan.
At one point they were trying to assassinate Harrigan. And it was definitely going to fail, but you got extra treasure for warning Harrigan that you saw something because it showed that you were being loyal to him.
Yes, Rin warned Harrigan of an attack, mm-hmm. and got a personal commendation with a special rapier from Harrigan, which is also the favorite weapon of Besmara.
Mm-hmm. In the AP it says short sword, but I made it a rapier because it just was more fitting. So after your successful first act of piracy against another ship,
didn't we have to face a major officer for the ship? But Harrigan fought their captain.
Yeah, Harrigan fought
their captain, and then our first sign that something was going wrong with Harrigan, which I think Linda, you said that you upgraded how messed up he was because you wanted to make sure that there was a good reason, because I think the AP assumes your characters are pretty mad about being mm-hmm. press ganged and are just gonna dislike everyone for the most part if they weren't very sympathetic, but you wanted there to be a sign that Harrigan was definitely bad because you had shown him as being too competent during the storm and generally evil, but mm-hmm. he knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
So he defeated the enemy captain. He ripped out the heart of the enemy captain and ate the heart.
Yes.
And then just something was going on with him.
Yes.
At that point in time, and this surprised even his long-term associates, and he was
brooding
in his cabin, and they're like, what is he doing? That's similar to rituals to Dagon and some other really evil sea-related deities.
So that was the first sign that because what the PCs didn't know by this point was that Harrigan had been starting to get into some trouble with some things tied to Cheliax, and
I think he was being blackmailed by Cheliax.
So he had decided to turn to some very dark and evil forces as a part of a gambit to get out of Cheliax's grasp.
Yep, and that last part Linda added, but the blackmail by Cheliax was
So I decided he tried to turn to some of these forces, and that some of these deeds he was doing was an attempt to sort of gain patronage or support from some of these.
That would pull him away from the devils.
That would pull him away from the devils because he would rather be serving evil forces of the sea rather than the devils.
And this allowed Linda to respec him as an abyssal blood rager.
Yes.
Which, very relevant later on.
Not for quite a while.
But since we defeated the Rahadumi officer mm-hmm. who had the boarding pike of OP,
yes,
we were awarded the boarding pike of OP.
Yes.
The boarding pike of OP is called the boarding pike of OP because as a swift action, it changes its reach from 10 feet to 20 feet and then stays that way.
Yes.
That is ridiculous.
It is completely ridiculous.
If you enlarge yourself, it also it increases the reach by 10 feet. So mm-hmm. if you enlarge yourself, but it also increases the dead zone by 10 feet. So enlarged Ty would have a 20-foot dead zone, but then would also reach 25 and 30.
Yes, but it wasn't completely a dead zone because if you pop one of your hands off of it, then you can punch.
And she can just kick
and things like that.
She could kick and elbow.
I think she also did sometimes.
And brawlers. She did whatever she wanted to, really, but because you can just pop your hand off, but because brawlers can use every part of their body, but the point was that if she was large, she threatened the first 2 squares. Then there was actually a gap of 2 squares, and then the next 2 squares after that, and that was without spells like long arm or anything else to increase her reach. And there are also other abilities that, like lunge, that she could sometimes use to attack things from super ridiculously far away.
Yes, and the PC and at this point when they had this new ship, then Harrigan allowed Plug to decide who was going to get taken onto this new ship.
Because Harrigan decided, Harrigan's building a fleet.
Yeah.
He was always planning on doing that, and he was headed toward his fleet location.
Yeah.
So he now had a new ship. He did something that Rin would eventually have to do a lot, which is we just captured a ship. How are we going to split it up? So he had his first mate, Plug, become the new captain of the new ship, which was a big mistake for Harrigan, because Plug, not the most loyal or competent to Harrigan either. So, yeah, like Linda said, Plug decided who to take along.
And Plug is just like, well, I'm definitely taking this Rin and all of her friends because once I have her out from underneath the watchful eye of Harrigan, I can make her life a living hell.
Also, Harrigan reminded Plug that he was not to do anything with Rin when he was taking when Plug was taking Rin. Plug's like, oh yeah, sure, because Plug didn't care because, frankly, he already had a plan to just mutiny from Harrigan and just become his own separate captain, not go to the rendezvous point and meet up. But that's basically what Plug wanted to do, and he wanted to kill off Ren and her friends. So he took his most loyal loyalists, his second layer of loyal loyalists.
And some of the Rahadumi sailors who had been spared, who were who he had reason to believe would definitely be too afraid to mutiny.
I think that they were in the hold because he was going to sell them into slavery.
There were a few most of them were in the hold, but there were a few who he trusted enough to bring into.
And he also brought
because you guys had talked so many people over to not be loyal to him, you didn't meet the threshold for there being enough people who could be opposed to you on the ship. So I had to pull some of them in.
Plus also he brought the named NPCs, the named basic NPCs.
Yeah.
While Harrigan decided that, I think that's what it was, actually.
Ponchabar and Cog and stuff like
Plug could choose who he was taking, but I think Harrigan decided Plug was going to take the majority of the basic crew, and that because of the fact that Harrigan was going to sail the Wormwood with the skeleton crew of the best and most powerful people.
Yes.
Because also there was no real explanation for why you get to keep interacting with these other NPCs, but you're supposed to be able to, and that was what you came up with.
So then it was basically Harrigan knew that a skeleton crew with very few people could handle that because they were ridiculous.
They were all, I mean, you hear the cabin girl, right? And I don't know if you think Will Hawkins, but
she was 3rd level at that point.
At least. And she was very legitimate. I think she was just the cabin girl because she lived in his cabin with him, but was actually a very skilled sailor, and everyone else that he took was even more skilled than that.
And then it's 8th level sorcerer, and he's just level something ridiculous even at this point. So.
Yeah, 13th level.
At this point, yeah.
And then you had me 16th level later on.
Yeah, but he gained a lot of XP.
Yeah, he did.
So you guys came on to the Man's Promise, and you've got this new ship that you're on, and you are, and Scourge hates you guys. He decided the crew was smaller. You had to roll fortitude saves or constitution checks to avoid fatigue because you had so many tests you were on.
And we didn't have the high. The problem was we didn't have the high-ranking officers.
Yes.
So even though we had a majority of the basic crew, say what you want about some of Scourge's and Plug's inner circle, but they were at least okay at doing their jobs, but not when they were promoted to become like Master Gunner and other positions on the new ship, and then Scourge became the first mate, and Bosun Master Gunner. They didn't know what they were doing with that, and we just had fewer people to actually do the basic tasks because they were all promoted into leadership roles and they just didn't do anything. But worst of all was the fact that Plug, if we thought that Plug, like, assigned people to roles they were bad at before, he just didn't care.
Yeah. All that he cared about was basically getting the ship to a port. So that...
But he didn't even care about that enough for Rin. The thing that really threw him over the edge for Rin was, one, Pontus was spying like he always does on everybody. Because he was just always kind of constantly spying and getting Plug in trouble because of spying and hearing things Plug was doing that were, like, sketchy. And then revealing them even before we left the other ship. But he found out that Plug was planning this mutiny where he was just going to not meet up with Harrigan. So Rin was mad because she wanted to meet up with Harrigan even though he ate a heart and figure out what was going on. Is this heart-eating thing just to scare people? Like, is he actually doing evil stuff? But like, we were supposed to meet up with him.
Yeah.
And he's a badass pirate captain.
And we don't want to be part of the crew.
Just gave me a rapier.
Yeah. We don't want to be part of the crew that mutinied against someone who eats the heart.
Yeah, we don't want to be blamed for the mutiny that Plug's doing. A. Yeah. And then B, another storm happened.
Yes.
And you know what? Up until that point, Rin thought, Plug is trying to punish us. We're fine, and he put us on these bad roles, but whatever. But during the storm, when we all almost died, Plug still assigned people to the worst, to the bad tasks. He just wanted to punish people to the point that the ship almost sank and he almost died.
Yes.
And that was the last straw for Rin. Because if you're a pirate, like, the pirates are not saints. They're, like, not good people. But if you're a crappy pirate, if you're incompetent...
If you want vengeance so much that you're willing to, like, potentially risk your life and make bad decisions for the ship...
For everyone on the crew, including yourself...
Yes.
Then, like, what are you doing? So, at that point, she realized that we needed to mutiny. Now, you're expected to mutiny. So, after the storm, like, we survived. Your ship is, like, broken, like, on this island, except you're
attacked by, you're supposed to be, like, attacked by Grindylows and all this.
So, well, we were attacked by
those. You were attacked by Grindylows to kidnap Sandara.
And that happened.
Yes.
So, Grindylows had kidnapped Sandara, but... Our ship actually didn't get completely wrecked because we managed to just eventually Rin had enough. It was clear to everyone on the ship, even Plug, that we were in big trouble because we were really bad in the subsystem.
Yeah.
And she started reassigning people.
Yeah.
And
She's just like, do you want to? It's like, do you want to listen to him or do you want to live? You do this. You do this.
And we actually went from almost just the ship sinking in the subsystem to somehow with some good rolls and reassigning people, just acing it. So we managed to not be that damaged, where the ship is supposed to be mostly wrecked on the island. It was not really that badly damaged, but the reefs of the island were hard. It was somewhat damaged, and Zara got kidnapped by Grindylows during this time, like near the end of the storm. So they expect you go onto the island because Plug send you onto the island to scout it out, level up, and then come back and do a mutiny.
Yeah.
But, so, the thing about Rin is, she was very loyal, but she immediately flips the switch once she's like, no. She's like, no, now we have to do a mutiny because he almost got us killed.
So now the ship is split into two contingents when they're on this island, and they separate. So
no, we did the mutiny.
Yeah.
We did the mutiny before the island.
Oh, that's right. You did the mutiny then.
We were way under-leveled.
That's right.
That's what we did.
What was the other thing where there was this... I think I might be confusing with something later on.
Yep.
You're right. So you did the mutiny now.
Because also, Rin realized that taking command during the storm was going to piss Plug off even more, and it did. But she also she was fed up with the fact that he was mutinying Harrigan. So we also called it the counter-mutiny.
Yes.
Because we're like... We even told some of the people on the ship who were, like, more loyal to Harrigan, it's like, that Plug has mutinied Harrigan. This is not even remotely where we were supposed to be going. He did not go to the rendezvous point, and we are counter-mutinying against him. He almost got us killed in the storm.
Yes.
And we talked to the imprisoned to be sold to slavery Rahadumi sailors and told them that if they joined our cause, then they would not be, they'd be spared that fate and either just could go back to Rahadum wherever they wanted in any port that we passed by or join our crew. And most of them, pretty much all of them, decided that they would do that, even if they were incredibly not really prepared to fight, because it's better than being sold into slavery.
Yes.
So we at this point mutinied them, and the issue we had was that Scourge was level, I think, 6 barely fighter at this point, and Plug was even more powerful than that. And so we had to, Rin had to duel Plug one-on-one.
Yes.
Because she always duels people one-on-one.
And because Plug like many people in this AP, couldn't refuse the idea of being able to beat Rin down on a one-on-one duel.
That's right. Also, even people who refuse a one-on-one duel, that's okay. Rin will not fight the other people who are trying to cheat, and the other PCs will kick the crap out of them.
Yes.
So, basically what happened was that there was a giant fight between all of our crappy people took care of his crappy people. So we had some of his more elite friends and Scourge who were fighting the other PCs. Yeah. Whereas Plug was in a one-on-one against Rin. And Rin had done some one-on-ones before. She had to fight Albert without her favorite chosen weapon. But legitimately, the fight against Plug was one of her most challenging duels until part 6, 5.
It was very close to the break point between those two.
Yeah, because he was way higher level. He was way higher level. She was, I think, at this point, like level 3.
Yeah, he was level 6.
He was level 7
or 7, 6 or 7, something
like that. He had iterative attacks. He had 2-weapon fighting, which is much harder to parry than not having 2-weapon fighting.
Yes.
And my hit points were so much lower than his that I had to do way more damage than he did. Yes. And this is also the only one that, like, statistically, I think I probably should have lost. The Swashbucklers, if you're familiar with first edition Swashbucklers, are, their saving throws except for reflex are like, completely awful, and they fail them pretty much automatically. But they also just basically cannot be hit in melee, for the most part.
Yes.
Now, Plug was so much higher level, and Linda rebuilt him to be way more optimized, that he actually still could.
Yeah. I was expecting that you would start as a duel, but then other PCs would have to chip in and help out.
Because I probably shouldn't have been able to beat him. Because he was over twice my level.
Yes.
And he was respec,
I thought,
PC,
like, Hector was going to heal you and, like, some other stuff, but no.
And it is, to be fair, it wasn't completely unassisted in that before the mutiny, Hector pre-buffed everyone.
Yes.
With, like, Bless, and he put some some low level, he's level 3, you know, he put what he could on Rin to buff her up.
Yes.
Okay? So she had some buffs. But still,
Did she have, like, Shield of Faith or, like, other stuff like that to help her out?
Yeah, I think she had Shield of Faith and Bark Skin.
Yeah.
But it was not much, right? It was the +2 version of those both.
Yes.
So, this was a very close fight, with some luck on, because the main problem was I could parry, but only a certain number of attacks. I could only riposte once per turn. Fortunately, he wasn't that likely to hit with his lower iterative attacks. Yes. So I got lucky in some ways that he wasn't able to hit with as many attacks, but he didn't do that badly. The main thing is that I did well on crits. That was very important because they not only doubled my damage, they gave me back panache, which I could use to parry.
To parry again, yes.
Again. So if I had gotten a little bit worse luck on crits, Ren would not have won that duel, and we would have had to actually add other people to that. But after Rin defeated Plug in a one-on-one, and the rest of the PCs had easily defeated the rest of Plug's people by then, because
there were like a few of Plug's people who hadn't quite been defeated, but who surrendered because they saw what way. Some of his lesser people surrendered, I think.
I think that basically it was over, and we were all watching Rin fight Plug.
Yeah.
Because it was hard.
Yeah.
So it was very clear that even if Plug won, the worst that would happen is he would kill Rin because, he got her low and just did a finishing blow, and then he would be defeated by Rin's allies.
Yes.
Now, the problem for him is that several of her allies had ready actions to attack him if he dropped Rin.
Yes.
But if he won the duel, his victory would be
short-lived.
Short-lived. Yes, very short-lived. But he lost somehow, and we imprisoned Plug and his loyalists, freed everyone else, and then we decided to explore the island that we were supposed to explore before the mutiny. But we, do you think that is a good stopping point?
I think so, right before we would get
So now Rin becomes Captain Rin of her own ship. And at this point, she actually still wants to meet up with and rendezvous with Harrigan at the correct rendezvous point.
That was one of the more, maybe I shouldn't say one of the more, because there were a lot of, but this was definitely one of the more head desking moments for Hector in terms of, I told you so, look, I'm the captain of my own ship. It's just like,
she's like, see, I told you I'd become the captain, Hector. And Hector's like,
Hector's like, you just got lucky in so many different ways. This doesn't mean it was good decision making.
She eventually did sendings where she determined that Harrigan was blaming her for the mutiny and wanted to kill her, and that we should not meet up with Harrigan.
Yes.
But at that point, it was like, yeah, we've undone Plug's mutiny, because that was how she spun it, and it sort of was. Yeah. With a counter mutiny, we've gotten this ship back. Let's fix the last few things. We need to save Besmara and explore this island.
Or save Sandara.
Not Besmara. Sandara, not Besmara. Don't save Besmara. Save Sandara, explore this island. There's probably treasure, because if Besmara sent that storm... she sent that storm as a sign that I needed to mutiny.
Yes.
Rin said. To show how incompetent Plug was to everyone, and so that and how good my leadership was, that I could take charge. And she doesn't send it without a treasure or reward. We didn't really get one other than the ship for defeating Plug. So that means this island is full of treasure.
So this kind of Rin logic actually works really well, because at various points throughout the AP, I didn't have to come up with, like, convoluted logic for why the PCs might be interested in something. I just had to dangle, like, a minor hook, and even beyond that.
The AP, I don't know how many people run it, but it's somewhat notorious for, like, mentioning a thing. It's like, oh, whenever we get a new pirate, we always say, to someday crack Tidewater Rock as part of the sayings. And then with no other indication that you should go there, the AP assumes that any pirate would be like, oh, well, if that's a thing that you say when a new pirate is made, let's go to that place immediately. But Rin always did, because she assumed there are no coincidences.
Yes. Which made it very easy to just have, like,
a random
general suggestions of treasure. Then it would be like, we're definitely going to go explore this. And Hector's
like, why? And Rin said, that person wouldn't have mentioned the treasure to us if Besmara wasn't sending us the treasure. So basically, Besmara was the avatar of Linda, the GM.
Yes.
Or maybe Linda was the avatar of Besmara.
Yes.
But they were one and the same. So, Linda was amused, and Besmara was amused. And Linda gave us treasure, and Besmara gave us treasure.
Yes, because anytime they jumped on a thing, of course that was going to make it be something interesting. So it's just this self-referring cycle.
And Hector had high wisdom. He should have been right, but he was always wrong.
And eventually Hector had to admit that clearly Besmara was making this happen.
Yes. He eventually decided, you know what? I've said constantly, it's like, this makes no sense. There's no logic to what you were doing. But you are clearly right.
Yes.
I might not like it, but you're right.
I may not like it, but divine intervention is clearly happening here.
Because there's no way we would have found treasure at this rate. Alright, so we'll pick up on this creepy island, or as Stunt Monkey says, that island shudders. Joe said we had issues with the idea for exploring the island. A couple of PCs had create water.
Yes.
Well Aram had basic hydrokinesis, so water was not necessary an issue, but we wanted to save
I think he's talking about. I think he's talking about how like the part of the impetus for exploring the island is but the ship's water source got broken, and now we have to find fresh water. Because
that's when Plug sends you out.
Yeah, that's when Plug sends you out.
We wanted to go save Sandara because Plug wasn't going to say, let's go save Sandara. He doesn't care about Sandara. But since we were in control by that point in time, we said, we're going to save Sandara. We're going to find the treasure that's obviously here because Besmara sent us here to find the treasure. And so there is treasure. And we're going to... During that time, we'll have people make repairs on the ship. And by the time we're back, we'll be here with Sandara and the treasure, and we'll leave. That was basically Rin's plan.
Yep. So we will pick up here next time.
So let's say bye to YouTube. Bye, YouTube.
Bye.
See you next time.